Previously on Fire Pit Friday.
Mr. John J. Hooker is here with us on Fire Pit Friday. What an honor.
Delighted to be here.
We're so excited.
Two pretty girls. Well, how can
There
I be
you
doing
go.
that,
Hey.
huh? This question has never been raised before the Supreme Court of the United States. The Constitution still bears the scars of that circumstance.
Yes.
We love missions.
Go change the country.
You go ahead. This is a good story. You go tell it.
Tennessee was the 36th state to ratify the 19th Amendment in 1920. And we had a very famous woman whom I knew from childhood, whose name was Anne Dallas Dudley. Her uncle had been Vice President of the United States when James K. Polk was president. And she grew up with an interesting government, and she was, I believe, the most beautiful woman I ever saw. She didn't die until 1955, so I was 25 years old.
Wow.
And she was so, at that time, she was 76 or 77 years old, and at 76 years old, she would take your breath away. She was so pretty.
My goodness.
Unbelievable
You had a little
woman.
crush going on.
She had a son who was one of the great leaders that we ever had in Nashville, Tennessee, who was the president of the Life and Casualty Insurance Company. His name was Guilford Dudley. And Guilford Dudley was considered by many in Nashville as the leading citizen. He was you were not on the A list unless you were on Guilford Dudley's list. He was the man, Guilford Dudley.
Okay.
And his mother was Anne Dallas
Dudley.
And she was the president of Tennessee Women's Suffrage. And she was the vice president of the national organization, the National Association of Suffrage. And she was a major officer in that, but she was the head officer of Tennessee. The legislature was equally divided on the question of whether or not to pass this amendment. There was great controversy about it in Tennessee. This fella Bell got in 1920 got a telephone call from his mother while he was on the floor of the House of Representatives, and she said, "Son, I'm asking you, vote for women's suffrage."
Yeah, as it should be. The mother.
The mother called him up, and he switched his vote from nay to yay.
That is amazing. I think she said something like, "Would you deny your mother the opportunity?"
He became the man who turned the trick.
Which is really cool.
But she, Ms. Dudley, she was the instigator of
Was she?
certified. Now, I have to brag a little bit. The Speaker of the House of Representatives in that legislature who took the vote, the Speaker himself, was my uncle.
Oh, wow. That's great news.
His name was Seth Walker.
What were men so afraid of? Why did they not want women to vote?
First of all, they didn't know any better. It wasn't their way of thinking. It was. I don't think it was that they felt superior to women. I think that they, in some ways, felt inferior to women. I think that they all had a mother. They all had every man has a mother, and the mother's the boss in the early formative years of your life. And so I don't think it was necessarily, it was just something they inherited. It came down from England.
So it was learned behavior?
It was learned behavior. I don't really think it was born in malice. I think it was born in just a mistake. They were just wrong about it. There was nobody in the beginning who was a sufficiently articulate spokesman of it. The truth about it is, and this perhaps is an unfair thing to say, but it's my opinion, That is, George Washington could have done something about it. He was the leader.
Yes.
And the father of the country.
Yes.
And when you look back on it, and he had a great relationship with his wife.
Yeah, and his wife was she was well known. She wasn't somebody who stayed,
I'm astonished, really, that George Washington didn't address the question. But Virginia had been in existence a long time. And it was not something that people thought was a proper thing to do. And strangely enough, a lot of women didn't want to vote.
I agree with him.
Yeah, I can believe that.
I do too.
Yeah, I can believe that. Because there's women today that think that they should be seen and not heard.
In a way, sort of beneath them. That's men's business. And them smoke and talk and big, I'll take care of this and they'll take care of that. And so women are not blameless in the pursuit. On the other hand, women like Elizabeth Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, those people who fought so hard for it are greatly to be congratulated. But then the 20th Amendment really changed the politics of America, and now we've got in a situation where not only did Hillary run for governor, but Palin did for president. Palin did, and it won't be long till we have a woman president of the United States.
Well, I wanted to
Before we do, we ought to change this Constitution.
Yes.
Yes. And so if you all want a little mission.
Yes.
We love missions.
Go change the Constitution.
John Jay, we need to take the responsibility.
Go change the Constitution.
But
and it's doable.
It's doable, and it's something that should just be natural. It should be natural.
Right here on this TV program is a notion that you all will go find a way to see if you can amend the Constitution of the United States.
We need to
take the word "he" out
of there
and make it.
Yes.
Well, because these women so long ago, they did everything based on assumption, and our personal mission is to, not just women, everyone, to get rid of fear and ignorance, because fear and ignorance are your biggest enemy.
Right. When we came from Europe to the United States to create a new world, we wanted to do everything opposite from the old country. And so changing our language even to some punctuation and changing the colors and changing everything around. We didn't want to copy, we wanted to be new and fresh, although we still subliminally copy everything that happens in Europe.
Right.
But do you think because it's a matriarchal society in England where you had a queen, that may have been something that went around?
Could well have been.
Because that's our theory. We believe that.
We believe that they just said, look, we just left this king and queen, and the queen is always ruling. I think what we should do is maybe start fresh, and let's start with...
I wasn't there, so I don't know, but it makes sense to me.
Doesn't that make sense?
Doesn't that make sense?
All that being said, you are so right. We do need to amend it, and we need to take responsibility.
Get on with it.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's it. And it just because we really, once we started digging into this, we just really didn't realize how little we knew or how much we misunderstood.
Right.
And the one thing that we loved was a quote by Susan B. Anthony when she gave her famous speech after she was arrested for voting. She said, "The only question left to be settled now is, are women persons?" And that's our mission.
Yeah, and for that quote, she was fined $100 and she was locked up. And I think now we need to just be sisters and stick together and just say, look, there's nothing wrong with being a woman, being feminine, loving your man, but you need to understand that it's not a woman's a social issue. It's basically just everyone learn the Constitution, read it for what it is, and if it's not right, then you need to change it. So
and don't assume that you're being looked out for. Ask questions, shake.
The fabulous thing about America is that two women like yourselves, if you're really serious, you really read this Constitution and really look at it, you can have a major effect on this. It lies dormant. It's dormant malignancy. It should not be in the Constitution. It makes a joke of our process. When we got all these women in the House of Representatives and all the women in the United States Senate, and the Constitution says that it will be a he. it makes a joke of it. It needs to be amended, needs to be a new modeled, updated, brought down to the reality. And two people like yourselves, if you'll really marry up with the idea and work at it hard enough, get a congressman, you might get Jim Cooper, get a congressman to go to the Congress and ask them to put a constitutional amendment in to take this language out of the Constitution. You might get it done. It's about time, and I think as two women being responsible and then also adoring our foremothers, I think that it's important that we just do this for.
Yeah, because it's we need to carry forward the work that was started, not just for women but for men too. It's humankind, it's not mankind.
And it's important.
It's people.
Maybe somebody will pick up the Constitution and read it.
Which we finally did.
Yeah, it's enlightening.
Yeah.
And it makes me proud to be an American.
It does. And it makes us, and it's proud, as you said, freedom of speech, that we actually can do something like this. We can put it out on the internet. People can look at it and listen to it. They can turn it off if they want to.
Sure can.
But we can say it. And that's the beauty of it.
Being a lawyer.
You could go over to the Vanderbilt Law School and ask them, what do you say about this? Why aren't you doing something about this?
We probably will do that now, John Jay. Maybe we'll take you with us.
What do you think? Are you up for it?
No, that's my deal.
That's right.
I mean, you do not mind putting yourself in the firing line. I mean, now let's talk about him for a while.
Let's do that. You are quite the man. You are.
I used to be JohnJayHooker.
Well, you've done so much, and you stick to your principles. You're very outspoken, but Cynthia and I really admire that you shake the tree.
Yeah. And I mean, really, up until very recently, people have been trying to shut you up in a big way, too.
Definitely.
Trying to censor you and bring action against you, disbar you.
Yeah.
Boo-hoo.
It's a free country.
That's not right.
Up for the Constitution.
Well,
the problem is that these judges who are on the Supreme Court of Tennessee are all unlawfully elected, all of them, and they do not want anybody to bring that to get to that question, because they don't want to be put off the court. They don't want to lose their pensions, and so here this fellow named Hooker came and shook his fist and said, "Don't do that. You're violating the integrity of the Constitution itself." And their only response to that was to attack the messenger, because they have no argument, the sensible argument against what the Constitution says. This Constitution of the United States, this is the Constitution of Tennessee. It says what it says. It says that the judges shall be elected by the qualified voters of the state in Article 6, Section 3, and instead of a situation where the governor appoints and then the people vote up or down, but the people never get a chance to select, to choose the governor. All they do is can vote up or down whether to keep this fellow that the governor appointed, rather than have a choice between candidates. That is the soul, it's the heart of democracy. Choice is the essence of democracy. And what these judges want is for us to take a choice away.
This is obviously a passionate subject, but can you tell me in your words why are you so passionate about this?
I'm a friend to the Constitution, and it says what it says. And I had this chance connection that that my grandfather, since you mentioned it, the original Constitution in 1796, written by where my grandfather William Blount was the president of that convention, they had all judges appointed by the legislature. So that ancestor was on that side of the issue. And one reason was that the judges weren't sufficiently well known, and particularly when you got outside your own little county and you were going to elect a Supreme Court of the state of Tennessee by all the voters of Tennessee. Well, the voters of Tennessee, somebody who'd lived in Knoxville who's a lawyer and wanted to be a judge, nobody in Memphis had ever heard of him, and vice versa. The lawyer lived in Memphis, nobody not. And so, because of the limitations of travel, limitations of communications, they thought the wisest thing to do was to have the legislature, just like the legislature was going to elect the president, have the legislature appoint these judges. That took place from 1796 till 1854. In 1854, the people found out that these judges were being selected by the legislature were so corrupt that they wanted to do something about it. And so they had a constitutional convention, and they amended the Constitution in 1854 and provided that the judges should be elected, the Supreme Court should be elected by the qualified voters of the state. That was in 1854. In 1870, when the Constitution was redrafted, there was an enormous debate over the question of whether or not to go back to the original proposition where the legislature would select the judges, or whether to stay with the new idea of the 1854 convention. And again, they were dealing with the proposition that to the extent that they were willing to let the people elect on a qualified basis, they knew darn well that the people didn't know the name of who they were going to vote for.
Wow.
And so, notwithstanding that enormous disability, that the communication about who these people was so inept that voters voted without, they just voted on the basis of some neighbor said, well, look at somebody, a third hand, fourth hand, they voted. But without any, as I said, 0.1% had ever seen a man who'd seen Andrew Jackson. That was just 1824. So the same thing was true on up until many years thereafter. All right, so it so happens that in 1870, the leader of the fight to keep the power in the people, which had been put out in 1854, and against the legislative power, was another ancestor of mine whose name was Henry Williamson, who lived in Lebanon, Tennessee. And Henry Williamson was my grandmother's father. Okay. And she used to tell me stories about her daddy that I can just remember now, sitting and listening to her talk to him. And he was a Confederate, and he had lost his arm at Gettysburg. And she would tell me that they had a two-story house, and that she could, when she was a little girl, that she could hear him walking on upstairs in the hall in the middle of the night to wake her up, and he'd be walking. That this arm hurt him so bad because of the nerves. It was amputated arm. But he became a judge, and he became a member of the 1870 Constitutional Convention in Tennessee. His name was Henry Williamson, and he was the leader of the fight to see that the people got the right to make this choice.
Wow.
About who's going to be the judge. And so somewhere, I guess, in my DNA, there is this aspect of where I came from.
Yeah.
And so that has been a big part of the impetus to do something about it. And I've got these judges so mad at me, they could spit.
Which I think that's like great.
It's just, it's
ridiculous to
in
stand
this
up
free
and say,
country.
wait a minute, it's a free country.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I know that campaign contribution is a hot button for
big
you.
Subject
in fact, didn't you recently run for Senate and not spend any money and you came in third?
Right.
That's quite a feat.
I was a Democrat. I was a Democratic nominee for governor in 1998 and never spent a nickel.
See.
How did you do that?
Well, I'd run before, and I had a certain number of people who'd heard of me, and so even though...
So they've actually seen you and heard of you and voted for you?
They had television and all that.
Sure.
But I mean, I guess the point that I'm making is that that's something that bothers you, is that people take money, I guess for the...
we must do something about it if the democracy is to survive.
Exactly.
It's just that simple. The democracy over time can't survive if public office is bought and sold. Mm-hmm. And the election process now is set up so that public office is bought and sold. Yeah. In some degree, and a substantial degree, caused by the Supreme Court of the United States, who, in a decision called Buckley versus Vallejo in 1974, misread the Constitution. The Supreme Court can misread it just like anybody else can misread it. Just like old Papa said, if your mother can't understand it, no lawyer can understand it. That applies to the Supreme Court too. Mm-hmm. The First Amendment says that Congress shall pass no law. The first word of the First Amendment is Congress shall pass no law. So the First Amendment, and as I told you earlier, the First Amendment only applied to the federal government for the first part of its existence until after the war and the 14th Amendment.
Then the states.
1868, when the 14th Amendment was passed. Now, the founders never intended for the First Amendment to have a damn thing to do with the financing of the election process. First of all, the elections were going to take place in the states, and the First Amendment only applied to the federal government, didn't apply to the states.
Right.
You with me?
I'm with you.
The second thing is that the reason it's called the First Amendment is because it wasn't in the original Constitution. And so when they had the original Constitution, obviously they did not intend for the First Amendment because it wasn't in there
Right.
to provide for the financing of the election process.
Right.
So the Supreme Court in this case, Buckley versus Vallejo, from their high perch with all the power that they have, there are 9 of them who appointed for life. That's one of the great...
That shouldn't even be.
That is
just
a
so
big
wrong.
problem.
Yeah.
They stay up there 40, 50 years. And they become more arrogant and less understanding of the people's needs because they live in this ivory tower. And they are positioned to control the destiny of America. And we have some very good judges. My father's best friend was a man named William O. Douglas. I can remember him when I was a child. I loved Judge Douglas. And they've had a lot of great judges up there and who made great decisions. And I, in general, as a lawyer, I respect the court, but I do also disrespect the proposition that every now and then they do something that I think is absolutely outrageous. So the Supreme Court of the United States has held, and it is the law of the land, that you can make a campaign contribution on the basis that is a part of your speech, that since you have the right to have your own voice heard, that if I'm running for governor or president or whatever, that you can give me money as an expression of your right. The problem about that is that it not only is in that transaction do you give it, but I take it. So the problem is that if you read the First Amendment to open up the proposition where public officials can take money, they automatically open the door to bribery. And you open the door to this disease we have of these thousands and thousands of lobbyists in Washington and in the state legislature who go fund the election of these various candidates, all for the purpose of getting the candidate to do what they want them to do. And someday the Supreme Court will revisit the question.
Okay.
And they'll have to redecide it. And every now and then, over the American history, the court does revisit a question and redecide it. For example, Brown versus Board of Education that overruled Plessy versus Ferguson that said that you can have separate and equal schools. And Brown versus Ferguson said you can't. Every child, black or white, entitled to go to the same school. So it took many years to reverse that circumstance. The question of the malapportionment of legislatures where the rural counties dominated the legislature because they were apportioned in such a way that they had more votes in the legislature than the city county. Took a long time, but finally the Supreme Court of the United States in the case of Baker versus Carr, and I had the high good honor of being Bobby Kennedy's special assistant, and had a lot to do with getting him to get into that case. And when he was Attorney General of the United States, they did get into that case. That case went to the Supreme Court of the United States, and they decided the case called Baker versus Carr and reversed the prior holdings about malapportionment and said one man, one vote. It was a big step forward. Someday, the Supreme Court of the United States is going to have to face up to the proposition that when a private citizen gives money to a public official, that won't do. I say to you, I'm not just teasing you. If you two girls, you two ladies decide that you want to amend the Constitution of the United States and take something out that's been there for 200 years, that is a ridiculous statement in terms of today's world, you may be able to do that.
Right.
I really thought that I had a wonderful chance to be the President of the United States. The reason for that sounds so grandiose, so arrogant, so if I were to tell you that I thought I had a good chance to be the NFL quarterback on a Super Bowl team, you ought to put me in jail for lying or put me in a mental institution for Well, the Lord did not give me the ability to be the NFL quarterback on any football team. You with me? That's the Super Bowl, right? If I told you that I was going to beat Tiger Woods playing golf, let me tell you that would be the worst sort of lie. You with me? No possibility. And if the wonderful thing about golf is it has a handicap system. So if I was going to play him a game of golf, not in a tournament, but just a friendly game of golf, he would have to give me strokes, and I'd make him give me so many strokes that if I could walk the course, I'd get my money.
There you go.
Because he can't give me 2 strokes a hole and beat me. I don't care how good he plays. He can't give me.
Tiger, that might be a challenge.
Now, however, the point's this.
Now, being the president is another story.
That's right. Here's the thing: that in order to be president of the United States, when you think of competition, if you wanted to be the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, you got to go into the military and compete with thousands and hundreds of thousands of other officers who went to the United States Naval Academy, the United States Military Academy, or the Air Force, whatever. And the competition to get to be a general is tough. To get to be a 2-star general is even tougher. Get to be a 4-star general, and then all that. You with me?
Yeah.
And so, if you ask me what I thought my chances are to be to be like Colin Powell, the head. Let me be honest with you, it's 0. But I thought that I could be president of the United States. And the reason for that is that all you got to do to be president of the United States is run against 3 or 4 guys for governor, and one guy to get your nomination, and then one guy on the other side, or 3 or 4 guys for the United States Senate, and then one guy on the other side. Then you get to be either governor or senator. Then you can run. Nobody can stop you. You can run for president. Then you run against 4 or 5 guys, 8 guys, however many guys, and then one guy on the other side. Nobody ever beat more than a couple of dozen people in their life to be president of the United States. So if I could have gotten to be governor in either 1966 or 1970, and I was close both times, had it within my reach, then I would have run for governor for president in 1976. And the Republicans were going to lose in that year because the president, Gerald Ford, had pardoned Richard Nixon, and the Democrat was going to win. So whoever got the Democratic nomination was going to win. There were only 5 or 6 people in that Democratic primary for president, and Jimmy Carter won. Well, I like Jimmy Carter, but I could have beaten James Earl Carter.
I believe you.
I think you could have.
I could have done it.
And you're so much better looking.
I had a pretty wife. I had a really pretty wife who was helping me. So I'm making the point really not so much about myself, is to make a point about life.
Right.
And so when you think about it, well, how grandiose an idea is to think that you 2 girls could amend the Constitution of the United States.